I'm depressed, guys. That's why I've been f***ing up lately.
He's pretty much a liberal shill who watches too much CNN.
Why haven't you been uploading? Why are you saying crazy shit on your podcast? What the f***?
And he's got a cushy YouTube career where preying on young kids. Now that in itself is pretty egregious.
Ethan's poor decision-making skills.
Give a half-ass apology.
They're leaving their original fans high and dry.
And they're losing fans fast.
It's time to stop.
Ethan Klein over at H3H3Productions has been under intense scrutiny over the last few weeks, and we're going to add some business and entrepreneurial clarity. We are going to analyze exactly what's happening, including topics from my interview with Tai Lopez on his opinions on H3H3 and the Ethan Klein dilemma, as well as my opinions and responses to perspectives of what we're hearing on the internet and on YouTube. Primarily, I think you might be getting deceived and lied to in terms of what's really going on with our friends at H3H3 Productions.
I've been pretty sad.
First, people on YouTube are making the very strong argument that how could Ethan possibly be depressed? He's making podcasts almost daily.
If you truly felt that way, you wouldn't have been making podcast videos. I mean, shit, Ethan, your live streams last for over an hour, so I don't really understand what you're trying to say. Ethan clearly wants to make videos because he's been continually making podcast videos, and he clearly has the time, so I don't understand what he's trying to say when he's like, oh, you know, I just didn't feel like making videos. Well, that's what you've been doing.
How could you be depressed when you're constantly putting out content? And if you really are depressed, why aren't you taking your medication?
He doesn't always take his medication.
But see, I believe that the problem is not Ethan. Instead, the problem is the society in which we live, which creates a pressure cooker of emotions that can be very difficult to deal with.
If he truly was depressed, like he said, he wouldn't be making videos altogether.
While Ethan took off the last 3 months on his main channel, he's still been streaming and podcasting on the second one this whole time. And this raises a few troubling questions. First, is Ethan really depressed then? He said he was too depressed to make videos, but then he's streaming on the podcast all the time, looking pretty happy.
Keep in mind, there's a major production difference between planning and editing something as compared to a live stream, which was really just sitting with the camera rolling. Well, I love my Saturday live streams because when I'm done with the live stream, I'm done. I don't got any editing to do. It's great. Unfortunately, this problem heavily afflicts entrepreneurs and those creating their own success. Then once you achieve a certain level of success, dealing with how do I keep the growth and success going?
The past 3 months, and specifically the past year, has probably been the hardest of our lives. It's just been a string of really difficult to handle events that I think really just took a toll on us.
At the same time, how do I keep some mental level of balance while also trying to come up with creative new topics?
I literally could not make any more videos.
Let's look at this by example. Last week I shared with you my actual tax returns. You could see the video here. I shared how I went from making $10,000 a year to over $381,000 a year net, over $500 gross, and I show you my actual tax returns. You might think, golly, there could be no way that somebody like that would have any issue with sadness or depression.
Ethan has everything. He's rich, he has a wife, a dog, a house in LA, and he's got a cushy YouTube career where he gets to talk to celebrities on a podcast. He's hanging out with Broke Malone, Jordan Peterson, Bill Burr, and more. And he can even take 3-month-long breaks whenever he wants. So when you look at it like that, if this guy's not happy now, he pretty much will never be.
Because after all, in order to make that money, especially as a real estate broker, which I am, you'd have to be pretty happy and be able to go around with a smile on your face.
Then he said he was too depressed to make videos, but then he's streaming on the podcast all the time, looking pretty happy too.
Well, I ended that video by saying that 2015 was probably the worst year of my life. So just like my sadness and depression didn't come through in 2015, I strongly believe there's a correlation between Ethan's ability to continue with sort of the mundane of making a podcast, simply talking to people, just like I might be able to continue with a smile on my face, showing properties. But that doesn't mean I am not in the background struggling with what's next. What is the next big thing? How am I going to keep success growing? How am I going to grow as a human being? And why does it even matter? What's the point? See, there are greater existential societal problems that we need to deal with piece by piece. And to simply say that, well, Ethan, can't be depressed because he seems fine on his podcast is a complete disservice to a problem that truly afflicts successful people. See, what's missing from folks who criticize Ethan is that they don't take into account this very simple principle, the difference between the mundane and the creative, the regular and the humorous, the normal, steady Eddie linear, and the growth, the exponential mind expansion that we want to have. What we want to have on one side compared to what we can do on a regular basis are completely different things. In 2015, I felt sapped for motivation and creativity. You could see exactly this problem recently on my channel. I made a Grant Cardone exposed video that took me 4 days to come up with the idea and plan for it, 3 days to film it, and 4 days to edit it. That's nuts. It's draining. It's psychologically and mentally draining to try to come up with something successful. Now, in my scale, that video did great. It has almost 70,000 views at the time of making this video. That's a lot for my channel. Now, H3H3 did recently release a video on an AI vape, but it took them 11 days from their announcing that they were going to make the video to their actual release of the video.
We found a talking AI vape. Okay, so you are not going to want to miss this world premiere.
To me, there is a big similarity here, and it was a hit. The quality was on point, and the humor that H3H3 is known for was imbued in that video. However, obviously I can only compare myself on a small scale to H3H3. So at the 2018 Driven event, I asked Tai Lopez for what his opinion is. Now keep in mind what one of the biggest causes of depression is when you are an entrepreneur or a self-made success: relativity. I say this in my videos, it's the toxicity of relativity, and unfortunately YouTube, Instagram, social media are the easiest possible way to compare yourself to other people. And comparing yourself to other people, rather than to your own goals, is highly toxic. And I absolutely discourage that in any situation, whether it's comparing yourself to your neighbors, in sales, in schools, or as we mentioned, on social media. That's because what happens is social media can very quickly elate us, and we get used to a higher level of standard. And when things sort of peter out, the theory of the hedonic treadmill will tell us that when we go up, we go down, and it hurts to go down. But that's the nature of relativity rather than us comparing ourselves to our own goals. Now let's see what Tai Lopez had to say about that.
So you've met with H3H3, Ethan, Klein, Hila. They're obviously going through a period of depression, or at least Ethan is. You're very social. What would you say to entrepreneurs in how to deal with that kind of depression of highs and lows in life? It's all ups and downs.
Yeah. I mean, some of it's genetic, some of it's, a lot of it's chemical, but in general, well, a guy once told me, I had lunch with a guy that supposedly had one of the top 5 IQs in the world. And he told me, I said, what do you think is the secret to life? He said, never get too high, never get too low. 1 to 10, always be a 7, he said, emotionally. Don't let yourself go up to 10 because then the only way is down. And he said, don't be a 4 because then you get stuck, lethargic, lose all your energy, lose all your motivation. So just try to stay even keel, tranquilo, they would say in Spanish. There you go.
Note, this is exactly what I felt in 2015, except when I went down to that level 7 again, because I started having chest pain and throat pain, I was depressed as well. The last thing I wanted to do was continue to come up with creative ideas, which got me to a successful place in real estate from the get-go. So essentially, I wanted to do less of what got me where I was because I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't help myself. There was no way I could continue to be creative all the time. It was painful. So this is a real problem, especially amongst entrepreneurs.
To how serious Ethan really is about improving his condition. 8 months and his attitude hasn't changed that much.
Some people take a lifetime to conquer this problem. Some people just need a few years. So when people say, oh, well, look at Ethan, he's fine when he's podcasting, what they're really saying is, oh, look at Ethan, he's fine when he's just having a conversation with somebody.
Then he said he was too depressed to make videos, but then he's streaming on the podcast all the time, looking pretty happy too. You're a performer now, bro. Start acting like one.
Oh, look at Ethan, he's fine when he's just showering or eating breakfast, when he's doing relatively mundane things, which is very similar to, again, me just showing a property, putting some signs in, meeting a seller. But that doesn't mean I can continue to expand creatively when I'm in a state of depression. Now, people might argue, well, wait a minute, Kevin, how do we know that you were actually depressed? Let me give you proof. From a Facebook post that I wrote, you can pause the video and watch it. I'm not going to read it to you because it'd go on too long, but take a look at the next three screenshots here just to get a full scope of what I posted on Facebook to my UCLA travel study page. The happiest point of my life in the summer of 2014, which is really sad to say because my firstborn son was born in 2015, which I've already mentioned was the most difficult year of my life, even though I made the most money that year. And see, to minimize Ethan's problem by saying that, well, why doesn't he just take medication, is completely unrelated. Because the problem that I felt, which I feel, and I can only assume, but I feel is relatively similar to what Tai Lopez alluded to, or what I believe Ethan must be feeling, is not one that medication could stand up to and solve. Because the problem is within our own personal mindset. Again, that sometimes takes people years or a lifetime to correct. Medication might mask the symptoms, but it doesn't necessarily solve the underlying problem. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, and I recommend that anybody facing depression consult a doctor. But if mindset is your problem, you might consider trying to start by solving that first. And it was something that I've fortunately been able to solve. Now, know that this also includes people that say they know depression or have depression. For example, like this person who clearly doesn't actually make YouTube videos themselves, which is fine. It's not a prerequisite to make comments on YouTube that you have to actually make YouTube videos, but it certainly makes relativity a little bit more difficult. But for somebody to say, I have depression, and I find it insulting that Ethan is continuing his podcast normally, but is complaining that he has depression and doesn't make YouTube videos on H3H3 Productions channel because he's citing depression, and this person somehow in the comment section thinks he can relate because he has depression, is completely unbelievable. In fact, it's despicable. Yet they do correctly mention or echo almost exactly what I say. A person has to deal with the depression themselves and take the time to heal. That doesn't mean you have to stop doing the mundane. And that is the big problem here, is people are not seeing the difference between the podcast and the creative energy that's required to make an H3H3 Productions video. Now, comments over Ethan's radio silence
H3H3 channel had pretty much gone radio silent.
Are directly related to people commenting on his depression, which unfortunately in itself is extremely ignorant and offensive. To say that somehow Ethan owes you a clarification,
Think that he just needs to give more clarity,
or worse, owes you content,
You're a performer now, bro. Start acting like one.
completely demoralizes the entire purpose of YouTube. YouTube is for you to share what you want when you want it. Ethan is not your service provider. In fact, the only thing egregious here is to say that somehow a YouTuber owes people something when after all the reason people watch YouTube videos is for their own entertainment or their own information gathering. I make videos on real estate investing, and I share so much insight on real estate and financial success in general. But people don't have to buy a real estate course that I've made and sell for $199. That doesn't matter. If people want more information, they can buy it, but they don't have to. And by no means, because I provide free content on YouTube, am I somehow obligated to provide more free YouTube content. If I wanted to stop tomorrow, I could, because it's my choice. But just because I've built a following does not mean I am somehow obligated to continue providing at somebody else's directed schedule. That defeats the entire premise of YouTube. And I recommend that people stop acting like a charity by being part of somebody's growth or providing them views or a subscription count, and instead realize that the reason people view videos is for entertainment or information. So the notion that somebody owes clarity or owes content is completely ridiculous. Third point, greed. This is by far the lowest blow.
They've also gone on to do many of the same things they used to criticize others for, namely being greedy and money grubby. And that's pretty shady and opportunistic if you ask me. Preying on young kids who will inevitably use their parents' credit cards to buy this crap. Not cool.
To say that somebody is greedy simply because they're trying to extrapolate their growth into different arenas, be it via merch, live streaming, or selling a course like my real estate course, is completely disingenuous, again, to the purpose of YouTube. You don't have to buy it. You don't have to like it. And honestly, in most cases, at least this is true of my channel, I'm sure it's true here as well, if you did buy something and then you were upset by it, you could pick up the phone and call me and go, give me a refund, and I'll give it to you. Because the purpose of making content, the purpose of extrapolating growth, the purpose of selling merchandise or selling a course is not out of greed, it's to make an impact. It's to share more knowledge or more entertainment. And to somehow confuse that with the idea that, oh, that person is greedy, is completely a fallacious argument. After all, money is symbolized by a number, but after a certain point, which we've mentioned before, money doesn't matter. What matters is impact. And if you don't want to be a part of that impact, you don't have to be. But to criticize,
He's pretty much a liberal shill who watches too much CNN.
and to say that somebody is a shill or is greedy is egregious. Now, I'm not going to talk about religious or political topics that have been brought up on Ethan's podcast. The bottom line is that if you don't like or support Ethan's podcast, then maybe don't watch it. Or watch it and take what you like. That's what I do. Or take what the other person is saying and take what you like from what they're saying. Look, you don't have to like Joe Rogan to appreciate the Elon Musk podcast that he had with Joe Rogan. And ultimately, nobody on YouTube is obligated to stay in their lane because no YouTuber pigeonholes themselves. It's an audience that pigeonholes YouTubers, and that doesn't work. It's not okay. People don't have to stay in their lane. They should be able to do and comment on whatever they want. Look, I do that, and it doesn't mean I'm right about everything. When I'm wrong, I happen to make a video and say, I'm wrong, I was wrong, I made a mistake, here you go. That doesn't mean you have to say you were wrong, but the bottom line is, it is a YouTuber's ability to share, which is what makes YouTube amazing. We all have the ability to criticize, but sometimes it's much easier to criticize than it is to actually understand the perspective of what actually might be happening in the background. Hopefully you can now realize that there's a difference between creating humorous comedy content and creating production value over simply the mundane of a live stream, which I have experience with, or a podcast interview, or showing up and vlogging a collab with somebody. These are completely different from what it takes to make a produced comedy video. And to say that somehow because somebody can do something mundane means that they're lying to you about their depression is complete and utter garbage.